All right, we will give it just another minute before we officially get started, but really welcome everyone. I actually want to start with a icebreaker today, given the fun we're talking about with fraud trends and catching things that are sometimes undetectable depending on which technology solutions you're using. So my question of the day, Karen and Kathy, is if you could be any fictional detective, who would you take? Like, I'm talking Scooby-Doo, I'm talking Inspector Gadget. Um, like, who else is great ones? The Great Mouse Detective. Who do you got for me? Which fictional detective, if you could be any, would you be?
Okay, I think I would have to go with Inspector Gadget on that one because it was just like all of the things that he could do and like cool
He,
tricks and everything and just always solve things. I'm gonna go with Inspector Gadget on that one.
he's also not the smartest of the inspectors on the list, and
Unsuspecting. Unsuspecting.
yeah,
There we
yeah.
go.
But he gets his gadgets are really awesome. So I
Yeah.
appreciate that response.
Hmm.
Kathy,
Yeah.
who you got?
So I was born and raised in Taiwan. So the sort of like fictional character aspect, I think I only had exposure to this anime called Detective Conan. I don't know if
Okay,
you guys know it.
I
It's
don't.
basically this like kid who used to be a high schooler, but then he was so smart and capable that someone from the mafia like zoned in on him, fed him like a kid pill, and then he became like 7, and he started hanging out with elementary school students while helping his uncle solve crime because his uncle is a police officer. So you sort of just like see
Oh,
this
cool.
very unassuming kid who tries to be a kid but also help his uncle solve multiple like murder crimes at the same time. And it's just always funny. There's like a little
Yeah.
bit of romance in that plot line too. They have like 1,000 episodes.
Okay. Awesome. Yeah, I'll have to
That's
check it out
awesome.
after this. Yeah, that sounds good. Yeah, I immediately went to like Shaggy and Scooby-Doo admittedly because I was like, oh, I just would love to tag along on ghost mysteries that never turn out to be ghosts. But um yeah, I don't know. There's probably better detectives to be than Shaggy and Scooby, though. I gave you crap about Inspector Gadget. They're definitely ones who get by just by the luck of the situations they find themselves in. So
And they always got
awesome.
food too.
Yeah, they do
Oh, I
always
mean,
have the
hey.
best food. Yeah, and Scooby snacks. Yeah. Well, awesome. Well, welcome everyone. We'll kick things off today. Thanks for joining us. Really appreciate your time to hear from our two esteemed guests that I get to intro here in just a second. But we're going to be talking about the four fastest growing fraud trends that we're seeing. Representing Yardstick, Persona, two companies that get to work with businesses all across the country and help them uh, protect themselves from the risk and exploitation that we're seeing. So, some really awesome stuff we're going to dive into today. Couple quick housekeeping things before we dive in. Number one, this is going to be recorded, and so for you who have signed up, this will be sent directly to you shortly following the webinar, and you can share out with your friends that couldn't make it on the call today. So you will be able to watch this back. And then number two, the chat function is open. We're gonna try keep things as tight as possible to get everybody back on the road after this meeting. But if you have questions, we'll try and address those throughout the meeting, and then save some time at the end to be able to answer any questions you have. So with that, I actually again have the privilege. My name is Jared Birch. I lead the marketing team at Yardstick, but I am absolutely not the star of the show today. That is Karen and Cathy, who are the real brains behind our operation, and get to be part of the conversation today. But starting with Karen, Karen is our VP of product at Yardstick. Karen has over 20 years of experience leading product and technology builds for various industries. She's in particular been at Yardstick for 4 years, helping us develop the solutions and build the solutions for businesses that I was talking about. So advancements in fraud is one of her latest big, huge initiatives. So she's going to be talking a lot about that today. And then Cathy. Cathy is the fraud analyst at Persona, where she acts as a first responder and strategic advisor to companies under active fraud attacks. So right in her wheelhouse with what we're talking about today. Cathy has a deep background in teaching AI fundamentals, data science, and research. She brings a rare blend of that analytical rigor and the real world fraud investigation that you all are probably interested in hearing about today. So really excited. Thank you, Karen and Cathy. Cathy's even jumping in for this on the road at a trade show today. So both of you doing us a huge favor just talking through these concepts today. Really appreciate you both being here. So real quick, we're just going to go over the four top trends, talk about them, talk about examples of them, and then we kind of want to spend the last couple minutes of today talking about the solutions. How do you even combat some of these things that are emerging? And then we'll, like I mentioned, save some time for Q&A at the end. So with that, I'm not going to steal too much more time, but let's take a look at the top trends, and I'm going to hand it off here for Cathy to start talking about leaked identities.
Yeah, so the first fraud trend we're going to talk about here are leaked identities. Most of us already have been involved in some kind of data breach or another where our full name, our PII, our date of birth, Gov ID number is leaked somewhere. And these are all things that are very much accessible to many individuals if you have a will on the black market. And what fraudsters can do using this information, they can purchase this information, right? And they can put whether it's a deep fake image, they can print out a ID and then overpaste like a deep fake image on top of it and use a deep fake to try to bypass liveness checks. Or they can go the other way where they employ someone else, an identity mule, and they print out their ID again and then they try to match that face with an identity mule's face. So with AI being so prevalent and so easy, so accessible to people, here at Persona, we actually see a 50x increase in deepfake activity just over the past couple years. It's really became a commodity to fraudsters these days. And back to the other technique where we use an identity mule to complete the verification, we see roughly 30, 28, 29% of all identity fraud right now involving these kind of leaked identities. So it's really becoming an issue to try to find out whether this is actually a good actor or a fraudster that is using leaked identities. So talking through what are the various risk signals that we can use to identify leaked identities. Here at Persona, we try to take a very ensemble approach, right? We say, hey, if you're a fraudster, we have an entire suite of signals that we can take a look at. And we may not catch the first one, we may not catch the second one, but we for sure are going to catch one of these signals. So it's really an ensemble approach that we try to go for, and we're just going to talk through some of the signals that is included in our ensemble approach. So the first one is manipulated identity documents. So most often than not, think about yourself as a fraudster, you purchase these identities online. Sometimes they're not going to include the actual picture of the passport. It's not going to include the issuing authority. Say Ontario in Canada, it's not going to include that. So you're going to have to make something up, right? So that could be checksum digits not matching up. That could be the issuing authority not actually existing. That could be, when we parse through the barcode, the unique identifiers are not, correctly matching. So there's a lot of different, just taking a look at the document details aspect of finding where tampering occurs. There's also the visual aspect of things. So when we take a look at a document, we just we don't just look at the details of the document. We also see how that document can potentially be manipulated. So that could be a portrait that is pasted on top of a passport, right? We can see elevated edges from that. That could be various security features that should exist, holograms that should exist in different spots that is not there. The entire identity, the entire ID could just look very flat. So that's the first sort of risk signal that we take a look at. The second one that we look at is ID document versus liveness mismatch. So just to give a little bit of a definition here, when a user completes identity verification, we first ask the user to submit the document itself. So point your camera, put your driver's license or your passport on a flat surface, point your camera on it. That's the document part. The second part is we ask the user to take a selfie. So that is what we're referring to as liveness here. So is this person that's in front of your phone screen, are they actually a real person or not? Or are they like a deepfake individual? So at this point, we can try to identify whether this person is actually live or not. And on the latter case, what we were talking about with identity mills, right? Like if you're finding someone on the street to print out an ID of and complete the verification of, we try to find the mismatches between the document data itself and the person that is in front of the camera. So one of the interesting signals that can come from ID document and liveness, the selfie mismatch, is age. Um, Often we see leaked identities, people using like 72-year-old person's leaked identity, right? And it's a lot harder for fraudsters to try to find someone on the streets who is willing to use their liveness to go through to be 72. So oftentimes fraudsters actually struggle to match the stolen identity's information with the person that they end up using for the liveness. So that's the second one. And the last one that we'll talk about here is the ID detail being tied to multiple people. So, in your company system, you might see, hey, like Karen Nathan, this is one person with, government ID 00000. Why do I have 10 accounts that are matched to this one Karen Nathan? So that could be a very strong indicator that this identity has been leaked somewhere. And it's all very dependent on each individual company's policies on how they want to handle detecting who the good user is and consolidating that and helping them through the very arduous process of trying to get back their stolen identities. Karen, are there any other cases that you're seeing from Yardstick?
Yeah, actually, on the background check side of things, I think a lot of times when you think about a leaked identity or an identity being used, you think about, creating or opening up a credit card or something like that. And, that notice then hits a credit report and the person gets notified that their identity has been used. When the identity is being used for a background check to apply for a role, there's really no signal to the person whose actual identity it is that it's being used. And so as we, have really seen at Yardstick and really believe, a background check is not enough. These identities are being used because they know they can pass a background check. So a lot of these signals that we're going to be talking about are really important. As Cathy was saying, it's that ensemble approach. One thing may not tip it off, but all of them together, we start to see the trends. So.
Hey, Cathy, can I ask a question real quick? We had one submitted, and maybe it really relates most closely to risk signal two here with ID document versus liveliness. Can you talk about how AI and deepfake, like how is that applying over the top of maybe in that example of like, yeah, you have 72-year-old credentials. Can they just deepfake the image? Like, how are you guys seeing that manifest?
Yeah, definitely. We see a lot of deepfakes come through at Persona. But we catch more than 99% of these deepfakes. There are very telltale signs with how AI generation sort of works. Like there's little things like very sharp corners within a deepfake. So there's like the background aspect of it where we're able to, really parse out the background versus the user and try to detect any inconsistencies in the background. There's also just like the texture of the skin. Once you see enough of it, it becomes very obvious. The way, we ask people to turn left, turn right, do all these random gestures. So AI a lot of times are not able to completely turn the left side, completely turn the right side. So they fail, like the pose positions, or they turn way too fast and it's like not a human-like turn, or they turn way too slow. There's various like there are various
Mhm.
ways that you can really detect whether it's a human or not and build models on top of it. But to answer your question, there is a lot more AI and deepfake coming through, but at the same time, I really believe the technology is walking in lockstep of this kind of development. The detection technology is walking in lockstep of the deepfake technology. Um, yeah, so it's really a whack-a-mole game. Like on Persona team, we try to push out like one deepfake model at least once a month. Over the past month, I think actually the past 2 weeks, we pushed out three new deepfake models. So all of that really folds into our liveness check.
Awesome. Yeah, super helpful. Karen, I think I'm going to turn it back over to you here. We're going to talk a little bit more about environmental masking as the second one.
Perfect. Yeah, this is another one that we're seeing quite a bit of where, there are a lot of tools out there to help mask where you actually are. So you can think about a VPN, you can think about a proxy where you can mask your IP address. Those tools are pretty easy to find, pretty easy to use. A lot of browsers have proxy technology that you can configure, or there are browsers that are out there really touting their protection of your personal information. So these tools are pretty easy to get at, but they don't always make sense. So you can think about, who is doing the hiring or who is doing the onboarding. If you're thinking about a corporate space, in the corporate world, a lot of people are using VPNs. So you might see that. And, I might be at my current job, potentially applying for another job using that VPN. You see that. But if you think then about, say the gig space where drivers are out all the time, they're not really using VPNs. So you're going to see a lot lower usage. So it really does, you have to kind of think about the context when you think about this one. So Jared, if you want to go to the next slide. Some of the signals that we have been seeing and that we're really watching is, it is not uncommon to take more than one session to provide the information that's necessary for a background check or even to do the identity verification. Maybe I don't actually have my driver's license with me at this moment that I'm going to start, so I'm going to come back in, so I have a second session. We can see between those two sessions, is there differences in what your IP address is saying? Maybe my first session says I was in Florida, and an hour later I come back and my second session says I'm in California. It's pretty impossible to be in those two places 1 hour apart. So it's changing that session data or changing data through sessions is one of the signals that we're watching right now. A second one is seeing that data from the sessions or from the location as a mismatch to the data that we're getting from the candidate or the consumer off of either directly off of their government ID or that they have provided for their background check. So think about their address. So kind of the same thing. In that example, if I started in Florida and I've got California, but my ID says I'm in Colorado, that doesn't necessarily match up. Does it mean that I'm a fraudster? No, not necessarily, but it is definitely one of the, signals as we kind of talk about aggregate signals again to be watching. And then the third one kind of ties back to that example of, would as a company who is onboarding contractors or hiring employees, would I expect my typical base to be using VPNs? And if not, and I'm seeing a lot of that, that is potentially a risk. So those are really kind of three of the key things we're seeing on the environmental side. Cathy, anything to add that you're seeing from the persona data?
Yeah, I think, I work a lot across various different types of customers, and just to put like some numbers on it, one of the customers that I was working with is sort of a customer that is uh their main customer is developers, website developers. So think like Bluehost. And you would expect that customer base to be pretty tech savvy, right? Like you would expect them to have a VPN that is set up around their house, geofencing their data away from the public. And you see that in data. Like 29% of their identifying their IDV use cases or users actually use VPN. Whereas, if we look at gig economy companies like DoorDash or Uber, we see like 0.1% people who are using VPN. So it really, back to your point, Karen, it really is about what your use cases are and what you expect out of your customers, right?
One thing that's interesting too, in when we talk about web session data and location is, can you speak to like the consistency of that in from device to device, like how that's approached where if somebody's see one location on a desktop and then that same candidate all of a sudden might be somewhere else on their phone, like how are you guys seeing that manifest in what we're looking at?
Yeah, I know, at least on our side, we do see that happen fairly often. So it is kind of, do you place certain metrics around that? Maybe you're okay if it's within a certain geographical range. 50 kilometers, 100 kilometers, whatever that is. But, if it's 1,000 kilometers, maybe that is not something that feels quite right, or again, becomes more of a signal. But we do
Yeah.
know that that can happen. I went through it myself and failed because my IP on my mobile device was showing up being further away than what I was just because of what Verizon assigned. So again, it doesn't necessarily mean that it is a bad actor, but it is definitely something to watch. And when coupled with other signals, can tell you quite a bit more.
Right, exactly. So on Persona side, like we have all this data and we actually aggregate it and calculate it into this one signal called impossible travel location. So that is set at, I believe, like 400 kilometers per hour. It's faster than airplanes, so that shouldn't be, unless you're on a supersonic airplane, that should not be happening, right? Um, so yeah, like we aggregate it into certain signals, but if we see that there are proxies that are occurring or VPNs that are occurring, then we see that okay, maybe this user was VPNing somewhere. So maybe, we don't treat if we see a combination of VPN and impossible travel, maybe we don't look at it as like as high of a risk, or maybe we say, hey, we want to push the user into a safer environment where we want them to use precise GPS, where we're actually using the cell tower to ping to the device itself to get the GPS location of that actual user. So there's multiple ways that you can sort of like go around it, but like in real time, the flow that I was talking about is definitely some of the flows that we see customers using as well.
You'd need Inspector Gadget jetpacks to break your rules, is what you're saying.
Exactly. It's really like an
Yeah,
if and or branch and try
yeah,
to corner the fraudsters into showing their tails at some point.
yeah. Love that. Um, I would love to hand it back off to you, Kathy, here to talk about our third fraud trend, which is account fraud. Can you define that for what it is and just kind of talk about what that looks like?
Yeah, so account fraud is basically there's sort of two ways that you can ultimately think about it. The first way is a fraudster uses a leaked identity, right? And verify the account itself and sell it on a black market somewhere and it depends on the monetary value of that account. Say it's a credit card account, like Robinhood, for instance, then I can sell it for a lot of money, right? But if it's like, I don't know, like Reddit account, something that's, just helps me say I'm over 18, that could be $25. So it really depends on the incentive there. But ultimately, we're seeing fraudsters sell accounts online, and that could be they verify themselves or they take over another person's account. So a good user has already created an account, but they intercept that good user's account in the middle and steal and try to verify. And after they verify, they would change the password, change all of that into something that they'll know and sell that account out there. So yeah, what we're seeing is verified accounts are being sold, rented, stolen, given away. And the person showing up to work, the person that is actually on certain platforms, the person that is ultimately gaining access to whatever that platform offers is not the real person that originally verified. And yeah, like fraudsters do recruit real people. There is a whole huge infrastructure that is behind this. So I can walk through a little bit of what we're seeing on Persona side and what our conjecture of how this whole infrastructure operates is. So first, we'll find a fraudster will find an exploit, right? Like your platform has, something a lot of money on it, or poor demonetization techniques, such that you a fraudster would want to exploit it. Then we actually see a lot of offshore IDV happening where they pass over that exploit over to they start a session and they pass that session over to someone in Bangladesh, Thailand, Pakistan, Kenya, countries in Africa, countries in Southeast Asia where fraud infrastructure is really robust there, and have those people over there take the IDV process. And it really is a volume game to them, right? Because for us, we can try to catch 99% out of 10,000 accounts, but the ultimate 100 accounts can still wreak havoc on the platform. So it really is a volume game for them, and there's a huge infrastructure behind it. Now, going to the different signals that we can try to use to identify account fraud going on. Um, the previous case I was talking about where there is geolocation mismatch post screen, during screen, what we're seeing in Persona is a session could start in Canada, for instance, and we presume that is the bad actor, the headquarters of where that bad actor is in Canada. So they start a session in Canada, and then the next session and possibly travels within seconds over to Bangladesh. And we see this person, like a printed ID, bad printed ID, a face that matches the printed ID. But yeah, like going back to that, we see the geolocation change across different sessions. And I think, Karen, you can also see it in the data that you get from Yardstick versus the data that you get from Persona, the IDV area, right? The second thing that we can see is account geographic clustering. So this signal is, say, you are a business that primarily operates in the US, but all of a sudden you see a huge spike in volume from Pakistan. Um, then you start seeing like, okay, this IP, this region becomes a hubspot for fraudsters to try to exploit your platform, right? And you can start building rules around that. You can say, hey, like if a velocity of signups exceed outside of the US exceeds like X per day, we want to start elevating it into medium risk, elevating it into high risk, start blocking that IP, start blocking that device. So yeah, that's how account geographic clustering works. And then the last one is going back to linkage analysis. When we were talking about linking based on ID details, Karen Nathan, right? Maybe now we can link on devices. And we see that being very useful because if you think about how the fraudsters are actually operating in Bangladesh and Thailand, in these countries, they likely are not switching out their phones every time that they do a verification. Because again, this is a volume game to them, right? So they might use a phone for 100 verifications, 200 verifications before they throw this away as a burner phone. Yeah, Karen, is there
Yeah.
anything you'd like to add on the signal side that you're seeing from the account fraud?
Yeah, this is actually one we've heard a lot about from Yardstick customers. We have a number of customers that either have entirely remote workforces or maybe do remote hiring. So there isn't that interaction. We've heard various flavors of it, but I think it could be, kind of like you were saying, Cathy, the person who went through the original hiring or onboarding or screening is not actually the person who is logging in to a particular account or a particular system. Or I'm about ready to take a shift And, it's an entirely different person who is showing up where you think it's Karen Nathan, but it's not. It's actually a dude who shows up. So, we're hearing this a lot from our customers. So, and whether that is willful, I create an account for my cousin because I know my cousin can't pass background check and hand it over for them to go ahead and do the work, or not willful. I think we probably have all of those cases, but this is something that is growing exponentially across Yardsticks customers.
Yeah. The one thing I'll add, in particular to this last bullet on multiple accounts on one device, the first time Persona has a graph tool that visualizes this exact scenario, and the first time I saw it, I think my like jaw hit the floor. Just being able to see candidates that seemingly had absolutely nothing to do with one another, all tied to one device, and just seeing this spider web of connection that can be otherwise invisible to businesses is pretty remarkable to see this like visually represented. So definitely can attest, at least from what I've been able to see. It's jarring when you see kind of that reveal. Let's go to our last one here real quick. Is wrap us out on the trend, Karen, to talk about payment fraud signals.
Absolutely. So I think a lot of times, when we think payment fraud, we think of the very traditional kind of credit card fraud. All of us probably have had our credit cards exposed. We probably all have got an alert on our phone that we just had a charge that no one had, that you did not do or anyone in your family did not do. That continues to grow. As you see here, 296 million stolen credit cards hit the web in 2024, and an expectation of 43 billion in credit card losses. On the Yardstick side, it actually has a little bit of a different flavor. So we have what we refer to as candidate pay. So a number of our customers, actually, they're onboarding independent contractors mostly, who often are their own businesses. So those contractors are paying for their own background check. So when they go through Yardstick, we then have payment signals that we can take a look at. So if you can go to the next slide, Jared. Some of the things that we are seeing is we will see, multiple users with the same payment. That may not be a stolen credit card. That could be a legit credit card. And sometimes you can tell familial connection, or you can tell there are multiple people at the same address. But often you see 5, 6, whatever the number is of different candidates in our world, or consumers paying for background checks on one card that seemingly have zero tie to each other. So that is one of the signals that we are watching and seeing grow as well too. Another one is, one user attempting to make that payment with multiple cards. So sure, that's happened to a number of us probably. You try the first credit card, it gets declined for whatever reason. You try a second one. But, this could be, or we see a user try 3, 4, 5 credit cards. And if those credit cards have been blocked, or those credit cards are showing up as reporting as fraudulent, big signal there to be watching. And then the third one is, again, kind of going back to all of these signals we have around location. This could be, I am paying for a background check and I just gave an ID that says I'm in Florida, but the card that I'm using actually has an origin of Norway. That's going to be a bit of a tip-off that maybe something's not quite right there. So the other piece of that is, again, we are seeing IP information through the payment area as well too. So is the IP location that we're seeing when someone's making their credit card payment the same as what we saw when they went through identity verification, and the same as what we saw when they started their Yardstick intake? And if not, what are those differences? So again, kind of lots of signals here, but growing quite a bit on the credit card side.
I love it. Well, I don't love it, but I love that we are, catching on to the different manipulation that is happening. And it's just, the one thing I think as you guys are talking through all this is, um, it's a little overwhelming, right? Like you just feel like it's this snowball effect of all, they are getting creative and it is evolving. If you look at any stats around fraud, it is all going up and to the right. And so I think it begs the question is like, what I hear you talking about is it's not one thing. It's all these things, and there's no necessarily silver bullet that the one thing is definitive in every case either. So it's kind of this multitude that you two are talking about of you're looking for little breadcrumbs, and the breadcrumbs in aggregate might be the tipping point for some of what's going on. So, what I want everyone, as you two have explained to me, and what we're talking about here today, probably to understand is each one in isolation might not be the end all be all. It is the aggregate you're talking about, and each one of these trends working together and influence each other for what a business might be doing. And so I think that begs the question to really looking ahead, like what do businesses do? Like, because this is an overwhelming problem. How do you solve it? You can't just throw your hands up in the air and hope it goes away. Single background checks like we've always done in the past. Clearly, I think there was an argument to be made those were never enough, but certainly now they're not enough. So what do you do? I'd love to maybe start with Karen talking about Detect AI, what we've done here on the Yardstick side, how we're kind of rolling out and thinking about solving some of these issues.
Yeah, absolutely. So Detect AI is a new product from Yardstick, and it really came about from hearing our customer, talking to our customers, listening to what they're seeing and experiencing. And quite honestly, a lot of them say, I think something is happening, but I don't know where to start. I don't even know how to go look to see if I potentially have bad actors in my workforce anywhere. Whether that's at the top of the hiring funnel or even actually working for me. So this Detect AI is really there to provide information and to provide signals to help customers see if there is potential risk in their workforce. So a few things that we are looking at, like we've been talking about already, device location. So we can surface the device location based off of what we saw when they accessed Yardstick's intake. And if I'm a company that says maybe predominantly hires in Texas, looking at this map, and all of a sudden I see a whole bunch of people that are in California and Minnesota. I'm really, so those are things that can help customers say, oh, wait, hold on. That doesn't really make sense with what I expect my workforce or my applicant pool to look like. So big part of that is location. Another part is around the PII. So take social security number. That's a big piece in what we do with background checks. And if we're seeing that social used multiple times for many different candidates, also a big risk signal that we want to make sure that is being surfaced. And then a third area is surfacing those signals that tie back again to payment. So for Yardstick customers that have candidate pay, we can show them some of these signals or some of the risk potentially that we're seeing. And it also does come down to every customer or every company has a different risk tolerance as well too. So helping provide the information then for customers to decide what they want to do with that information. But a part of it is knowing it. I think one of the huge pieces and one of the things why we implemented identity verification a couple years ago and have such a strong partnership with Persona is the belief of how critical identity verification can be in this whole process, both for your applicants as well as your workers. So Cathy can hit the IDV space.
Yeah. So identity verification is a very lightweight version of what, Yardstick is doing, which is the whole background check, the whole Shazam. Identity verification, we take a look at the GovID, we take a look at the selfie, and we make sure that all the information matches and the signals that we are getting from the customers make sense, like what Karen is saying. Are you supposed to be in India? Are you supposed to be in China right now? I don't know. Um, so frequently we see customers, implement identity verification in multiple aspects of the funnel, whether that be in the very beginning, when the customer first applies for the platform, or whether that be account recovery cases, whether that just be, you haven't been active for 15 days, make sure that you are who you say you are. Or if they have tripped multiple signals on the platform, then do an identity verification again to just make sure that you are who you say you are. So on the persona side, there's a lot of in addition to the ease of putting identity verification in any aspect of your workflow by just, calling our webhook, bringing the user over to the persona experience, we also have graph analysis, like what you were talking about, Jared, with linking on devices. We now have a huge push towards signal because talking with you guys, like you guys tell us how important geography is. How do you actually build signals on top of what we get as raw values in IP addresses and geography? And we have a bunch of different dashboards that can show really where the tail ends of your population lies. Because we all know that fraud really occurs at the tails where you least sort of like expect it. But once you catch onto a tail, you can really expand it out into a whole fraudster ring. So yeah, Persona has a lot of different signals and graph products that can help with the ease of putting identity verification anywhere.
That. Karen, you want to close us out here with
Absolutely.
this
I
one?
think, yeah, both Cathy and I have kind of touched on, how important it is to be thinking not just a point in time, not just at the top of your hiring funnel or at the background check point or, at the time you're actually onboarding someone. Like it is really important to be reducing risk throughout your entire workforce or your entire worker life cycle. So this is another thing that we have, seen, heard, and really goes to why Yardstick says one point in time background check is not enough. Well, workers, once they're in your workforce, can be devastating if they are bad actors to your reputation, monetarily, to your own customers. So making sure that you are doing a level of monitoring of your workforce after they get in, also super important. So that could be something about like running a recheck of a background check on a regular cadence. It could be continuous criminal monitoring because, I might go through a background check today and tomorrow I go commit a crime and my employer doesn't know anything about that. So, having a regular check to look for those things. If you have workers who have to have a certain license, a professional license or a healthcare license, you want to make sure that that license is still valid and there's no actions against that license. If you have drivers, is the driver's license still valid? Have they had actions against their driver or crime or like violations? Driving violations. So all really important things to be thinking about of just how do you reduce risk through your entire life cycle. So these are all products, services that Yardstick has, and really something that we believe in and we'll be talking a lot about because again, fraud doesn't happen at one point. It can happen at any point. So you got to be on top of it. And as Cathy called out, it is whack-a-mole. So, just one
Yeah.
tactic is pretty much never enough.
Yeah, and I mean another perfect use case, which you guys alluded to, is an account comes in and gets sold off is the person who shows up for a driving shift, the person who signed up initially, so that redoing an IDV at sporadic, intentional points in time can be really impactful with Persona's IDV too. So I mean, there's a lot of different things that I think well said, Karen. If you stop the moment you welcome somebody into your front door, you're also missing a lot of elements that could be attacking and exploiting your system. I know we're getting close on time. I think the three of us can hang on for a couple of minutes if there's additional questions that come in. We'll hang on for that. But there's none in the chat right now that we need to address that you guys haven't already talked about. What I would love to say is just that, certainly the products and solutions we talked about today are a little bit of a plug for us. We are really excited about the things Yardstick, Persona are doing individually, but more importantly together to solve this problem. But I cannot preach enough, I guess, in this situation that we really do think every business out there today if you're not evolving what you're doing to some extent, whether that's with us, which we love, or with other providers that are doing what we're trying to do to build technology to fight fire with fire, of the technology and tactics that are being used today by fraudsters. Like, we cannot uh, say highly enough how much you need to be thinking about that pretty actively right now with the trends we're seeing in the marketplace. So, Karen and Cathy, I can not thank the two of you enough for just sharing your insights, wisdom of what you're seeing, but more importantly, that you two are actively solving these problems today for businesses, people's teams to make our world better, not worse. And so, love the innovation that's coming out. We will continue to offer some of these webinars, so everyone keep a lookout for the next one on the calendar, which we're aiming for a month from now. But want to thank you for joining us today.
Thanks for having us. It's always fun to talk about fraud.
Yeah. Yes. All right. Thanks, everyone. Have a good one.
Thank you.
Thanks.